I didn't hear the announcement at first because the screaming was too loud. I stood there, frozen in the middle of Terminal 4, clutching the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. My ex-husband, Julian, was red in the face, his voice booming so loudly that people 3 gates away were turning to look. Beside him stood Isabella, the woman he destroyed our marriage for, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly, a smug, pitying smile painted on her lips. Behind them were his parents and his sister, the chorus of nightmares who had made my life a living hell for 5 years. They looked at me with that familiar mix of disgust and amusement, like I was a stray dog that had wandered into a country club. "Look at you," Julian spat, gesturing at my camel trench coat and flat shoes. "5 years, Elena, and you still look like a charity case. I told you you'd be nothing without me." Isabella laughed, a tinkling, cruel sound. "Honey, don't be mean. Maybe she's flying standby. Economy class fits her." I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. It was happening again. The paralysis. The shame. The feeling of being small. A circle of onlookers had formed, phones raised, recording the humiliation. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the old scars tearing open. They thought they had won. They thought this was just another Tuesday where the wealthy Sterling family kicked the poor girl into the dirt. But then, a voice cut through the noise of the terminal, crisp, professional, and amplified by the speakers overhead. "Mrs. Elena Sterling, your aircraft is ready for immediate departure. Please proceed to the private aviation gate. Captain Rogers is waiting." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Julian's jaw literally drop. I saw the color drain from his mother's face. And in that silence I straightened my spine, looked them dead in the eye, and smiled. Let me tell you exactly how I got to this moment. This is my story of betrayal, rock bottom, and the kind of revenge that is best served ice cold. If you love a story where the underdog takes everything, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and get comfortable. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this. 5 years ago, I was living in a delusion. I met Julian in my final year of university. He was magnetic. He had this way of looking at you that made the rest of the room disappear. We met in a library of all places. I was struggling with a stack of books, and he didn't just hold the door. He carried them all the way to my car. We stood in the parking lot talking for 3 hours until the streetlights came on. He told me he wanted to build something real. He told me he was tired of the fake, social climbing women his family tried to set him up with. He said I was a breath of fresh air. I was young, naive, and I believed him. I fell in love with a ferocity that scares me when I look back on it now. We eloped 6 months later. He said it was romantic. I later realized it was because he knew his family would stop the wedding if they could. But you can't hide a marriage forever. The first time I met the Sterling family, I knew I was walking into a war zone without armor. We drove up the winding driveway to their estate, a massive, imposing mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. My stomach was doing somersaults. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror 10 times. I had black hair, pale skin, and I was wearing the most expensive dress I owned, which I had bought on sale at an outlet mall. "Just be yourself," Julian had said, squeezing my hand. "They'll love you." He was lying. Or maybe he was just delusional. His mother, Victoria, opened the door. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She looked at my shoes, then my dress, then my face, her eyes cold and calculating. "So," she said, her voice like cracking ice, "this is the girl. Not Elena. The girl." Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. His father, Richard, sat at the head of the table and didn't acknowledge my presence for the first 20 minutes. When he finally spoke, he didn't look at me. He looked at Julian. "I suppose we'll have to have a prenuptial contract drawn up retroactively, though I doubt she has anything to protect." I felt my face burn. "I work as a graphic designer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I do have savings." His sister, Camilla, snorted into her wine glass. "Savings? Oh, that's adorable. You mean like a piggy bank?" They all laughed. Julian chuckled nervously, looking down at his plate. That was the first red flag waving violently in my face. He didn't defend me. He let them dissect me like a biology frog. Victoria spent the rest of the meal criticizing my table manners. Elbows off the table, dear. We aren't in a cafeteria. That is the fish fork, not the salad fork. Goodness, didn't your mother teach you anything? My mother died when I was 12. Julian knew that. He didn't say a word. Over the next 2 years, the abuse became my daily reality. We moved into a guest cottage on their estate to save money, but it was really so they could monitor me. I became their punching bag. If it rained, it was somehow my fault. If Julian was stressed at work, Victoria would corner me in the kitchen and hiss, "You're distracting him. He needs a wife who understands his world, not a burden who drags him down." Camilla was worse. She would throw elaborate parties and forget to put me on the guest list, so I'd have to hide in the cottage while the elite of the city drank champagne on the lawn 50 feet away. When I confronted Julian, he'd just sigh. "You're being sensitive, Elena. Camilla is just scatterbrained. Don't make waves. Please for me." So I made myself smaller. I stopped voicing my opinions. I changed the way I dressed to please Victoria, wearing drab colors and high necklines. I stopped laughing loudly. I became a ghost in my own marriage, haunting the hallways, desperate for a crumb of affection. I told myself it was worth it because I loved Julian. I told myself that eventually they would see I was a good person. Then came Isabella. She wasn't subtle. She was the daughter of Richard's business rival, wealthy, blonde, polished, and vicious. She started showing up at Sunday dinners. "Just a family friend," Julian said. But I saw the way she touched his arm. I saw the way Victoria beamed at her. The way Richard actually poured her drink. "Isabella just got back from Milan," Victoria announced one evening, staring pointedly at me. "She knows the latest fashion trends. You could learn a thing or two, Elena." Isabella smiled at me, a predator looking at prey. "Oh, leave her alone, Victoria. Not everyone is cut out for high society. Some people are just simple." I looked at Julian, begging him with my eyes to say something. He was busy cutting his steak. The gaslighting started shortly after. I'd smell perfume on his collar, something musky and expensive, completely different from mine. "It's the receptionist," he'd say. "She sprays it everywhere." I'd find receipts for jewelry I never received. It was a gift for a client's wife. I'd see texts pop up at midnight. "Miss you. Wrong number." I started to feel like I was going crazy. I would cry in the bathroom with the shower running so they wouldn't hear me. I asked Julian if he was happy. He looked at me with dead eyes and said, "I'm as happy as I can be, considering the stress you put me under with your paranoia." My paranoia. He turned my gut instinct into a mental illness. His family jumped on that narrative immediately. "Elena seems unstable," I heard Victoria whispering to a neighbor. "We're very worried about her mental state. She hallucinates things." The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with silence. It was a Tuesday. I had come home early from the city because I had a migraine. I walked into the main house to get some ice, and there they were, sitting in the living room. Victoria, Camilla, and Isabella. They were looking at wedding albums. Not mine. Sample albums. They stopped talking the moment I walked in. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Isabella didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. Victoria stood up, smoothing her skirt. She didn't look at me with hate this time. She looked at me with finality. "We're planning the future, Elena. A future that fits this family." "I am this family," I whispered. "No," Camilla laughed, cruelty dancing in her eyes. "You're a placeholder. And your time is up." Julian walked in a moment later. He must have known they were there. He looked at me, then at his mother, then at Isabella. He walked past me and went to stand next to Isabella. He didn't touch her, but the proximity said everything. He had chosen his side. "We need to talk," he said to me, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to someone who doesn't fit in. It's embarrassing, Elena. You're embarrassing me." I felt the floor drop out from under me. I gave up everything for you. I managed to choke out. I changed everything about myself for you. That's the problem, he sneered. You're pathetic. I need a queen and you're just a peasant. The divorce was brutal. They had a team of sharks for lawyers. I had a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. They hit me with everything. They claimed I was mentally unstable. They claimed I had hidden assets. They dragged the process out until I was bled dry. They took the car. They froze our joint accounts. Victoria even sued me for the cost of the rent, for the guest cottage we had lived in for 2 years. I stood before the judge, shaking, while their lawyer painted me as a gold-digging lunatic. Julian sat there, holding Isabella's hand, not looking at me once. The judge, swayed by the mountain of fabricated evidence and the sterling influence, ruled in their favor on almost every count. I walked out of that courthouse with 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of personal items, and $400 to my name. Good luck, Camilla whispered as she passed me on the courthouse steps. Try not to starve. I moved into a studio apartment in the worst part of the city. The walls were peeling, the radiator clanked all night like a dying engine, and I'm pretty sure the neighbor was running a meth lab. I spent the first 2 weeks lying on a mattress on the floor, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. I was broken, not just sad, destroyed. I had believed in a love that was a lie. I had let them strip away my identity until I didn't know who I was anymore. I applied for jobs, but I got rejected everywhere. I found out later that Richard Sterling had made calls. He had blacklisted me in the industry. Do not hire her, he'd told people. She's in trouble. She stole from us. It was a lie, but his power made it the truth. I was down to my last $50. I was eating instant noodles once a day. I sat on the floor of that apartment, looking at a bottle of sleeping pills, wondering if it would just be easier to go to sleep and not wake up. The pain was physical. It felt like a heavy stone sitting on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Then came the knock on the door. I ignored it at first. I didn't want to see anyone. But the knocking persisted. Hard, rhythmic, determined. I dragged myself up and opened the door a crack. Standing there was my Uncle Leo. He was my mother's brother. A rough-around-the-edges man with calloused hands and a heart of gold. I hadn't seen him in 3 years because Julian thought he was too common and didn't want him at the house. Leo took one look at me, gaunt, pale, eyes red from crying, and he didn't say a word. He pushed the door open, walked in, and pulled me into a bear hug that smelled like sawdust and old tobacco. I heard, he said into my hair while I finally let go and sobbed. I heard what those bastards did. He stayed for 3 days. He cooked for me. He cleaned the apartment. He fixed the radiator. And on the 3rd night, he sat me down at the tiny wobbly table. Elena, you have to get up, he said sternly. I can't, I whispered. They took everything, Leo. My reputation, my money, my confidence. I have nothing. You have your hands, he said, grabbing them. And you have your mother's talent. My mother had been a phenomenal cook. Not a chef, just a home cook who could make magic out of nothing. She had taught me everything she knew before she passed. I have savings, Leo said, pulling a worn checkbook out of his pocket. It's not much. 20,000. It's my retirement fund. No, I said, pulling back. Leo, I can't. If I lose it. You won't, he said, his eyes fierce. There is a little hole-in-the-wall spot for lease on 4th Street. It used to be a donut shop. It's a dump. But the kitchen works. Open a place, Elena. Cook the food your mama taught you. Feed people. That's how you heal. Why would you do this? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Because you're a fighter, he said. You just forgot for a while. Make them regret the day they let you go. I took the check. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. I rented the space. It was worse than a dump. It was a disaster. I scrubbed grease off the walls until my fingers bled. I painted the interior myself at 2 a.m., listening to the radio, fueled by rage and caffeine. I went to the market at 4 a.m. to haggle for the best vegetables because I couldn't afford the distributors. I named it the Hearth. Simple. Warm. I opened on a rainy Tuesday. I had no money for advertising. I just unlocked the door, turned on the open sign and waited. The smell of rosemary and roasting garlic wafted out onto the street. The first week was terrifying. I sat on a stool behind the counter, watching people walk past the window, praying they would stop. I had invested every penny of Uncle Leo's life savings into flour, olive oil, and second-hand tables. If this failed, I wouldn't just be homeless. I would have destroyed the only family I had left. The anxiety was a constant hum in my ears, louder than the traffic outside. On the first day I had 3 customers. One was a confused tourist looking for the subway, who bought a coffee out of pity. The other 2 were construction workers drawn in by the smell of my slow-roasted pork shoulder. I watched them take the first bite from the kitchen door, holding my breath. One of them stopped chewing. He looked at the sandwich, then at his friend. "Holy cow," he mumbled, mouth full. "This tastes like my grandma's Sunday dinner." They came back the next day with 4 friends. By Friday, the lunch rush was actual chaos. I was the chef, the waitress, the dishwasher, and the janitor. I was on my feet for 18 hours a day. My back throbbed, my feet were covered in blisters, and I smelled constantly of onions and bleach. But for the first time in 5 years, I was free. When I chopped vegetables, I wasn't worrying about Victoria criticizing the size of the dice. When I wiped tables, I wasn't terrified of Julian finding a streak. I was exhausted, but I was alive. I poured all my pain into that food. The rage I felt at Julian went into the kneading of the bread. The sadness I felt about my lost years went into the slow-simmering sauces. I wanted people to eat my food and feel cared for, something I hadn't felt in so long. The Hearth became a local secret, then a local favorite. I couldn't afford staff yet, so Uncle Leo came in on weekends to wash dishes. He'd stand at the sink humming, watching the packed dining room with tears in his eyes. "I told you, Elena," he'd say, snapping a towel at me. "You got the magic hands." 6 months in, I was barely breaking even, but I was paying the rent. I was surviving. And then he walked in. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the dead time between lunch and dinner. The bell above the door jingled, and a man stepped in. He was tall, wearing a simple white t-shirt, dark denim jeans, and boots. He had dark hair that was slightly messy, and he looked tired. Not sleepy tired, but soul tired. The kind of tiredness I knew intimately. "We're technically closed for prep until 5, I called out from the open kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron. He paused, looking at the menu board. "I just need coffee," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly. "And maybe whatever smells like sage?" I hesitated, then sighed. "Sit down. I'll bring it out." I brought him a black coffee and a plate of the braised chicken I was testing for the dinner menu. He ate in silence. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't read a book. He just ate slowly, staring out the window at the gray street. When he finished, he stood up, walked to the counter, and put a $100 bill in the tip jar. "Keep the change," he said. "Sir, the coffee is $3, I said. "I can't take this." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. He had intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through my defenses. "You didn't just cook that chicken," he said quietly. "You crafted it. That's the first meal I've had in a year that tasted like something real. Keep the money." He walked out before I could argue. He came back the next day. And the next. His name was Adrian. That's all he said. He was a man of few words. He would come in at 3 p.m., order the special, eat in silence, leave a massive tip, and go. He became a fixture. I started looking forward to 3 p.m. I started making things specifically with him in mind, heartier stews, fresh crusty bread. One rainy afternoon, the shop was empty except for him. I was sitting at a table near the back, tallying receipts, rubbing my temples. The stress of the finances was getting to me. The stove needed repairs, the rent was going up, and I was terrified the bubble would burst. "You look like you're carrying the world," Adrian said. It was the first time he'd spoken to me first. I looked up, startled. "Just numbers. The stove is dying." Let me look at it, he said, standing up. What? No, I can't. He was already in the kitchen. I followed him, protesting, but he was already on his knees, looking at the pilot light assembly. He asked for a wrench. For 20 minutes, he tinkered, adjusted, and banged on the old metal beast. Then whoosh! The flame caught, blue and steady. He stood up, wiping grease onto his jeans. He smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile, and it transformed his face. He looked younger, lighter. There. Bad valve. Are you a mechanic? I asked, handing him a towel. Something like that, he said evasively. We started talking. Really talking. He asked me how I started the place. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him about the divorce, about losing everything, about Uncle Leo. I expected him to gloss over it like most men would. But he listened. He leaned in. He got angry on my behalf. They tried to bury you, he said softly, his jaw tightening. But they didn't know you were a seed. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. I learned a little about him too. He told me he had lost his wife 3 years ago to cancer. He told me he had been drifting, working, trying to find a reason to care about things again. Your food, he said, meeting my eyes. It was the first thing that woke me up. A friendship blossomed. It wasn't romantic at first. It was two broken people finding safety in each other. He helped me fix the shelves. I made him dinner. He started helping me with the books, showing me where I was losing money on inventory. He was brilliant with numbers. Then, about 4 months after we met, the landlord dropped the bomb. He was selling the building. The new owners wanted to tear it down and build condos. I had 30 days to vacate. I fell apart. I sat in the middle of the kitchen after closing, sobbing. This was it. I had clawed my way up from the bottom, and now the ladder was being kicked away. The bell jingled. The door was locked, but Adrian had a key. I had given him one so he could drop off supplies for me in the mornings. He found me on the floor. Elena, he said, rushing over. What happened? It's over, I choked out, handing him the eviction notice. I lost. They win. I'm going to be nothing again. Adrian read the paper. His face went stone cold. Not at me, but at the situation. He stood up and paced the small kitchen. You trust me? He asked suddenly. What? Do you trust me, Elena? Yes, I said. And I realized I did. I trusted him more than I had trusted anyone in years. Wash your face, he said. Meet me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at this address. He wrote something on a napkin. Wear something nice. Adrian, what? Just trust me. The next morning I took the subway to the address. It was in the financial district. A massive glass skyscraper that touched the clouds. I stood in the lobby, feeling incredibly underdressed in my simple slacks and blouse. I went to the security desk. I'm here to see Adrian. I don't actually know his last name. I realized, feeling stupid. He told me to come here. The security guard looked at the napkin. His eyes widened. He stood up straighter. Mr. Sterling is expecting you on the top floor. Private elevator to your left. My heart stopped. Sterling. I froze. No, it couldn't be. Was he related to Julian? Was this some sick joke? Was this the final nail in the coffin? A setup to humiliate me one last time? I almost ran out of the building. But I remembered Adrian's eyes. Kindness. The way he fixed my stove. I took the elevator. My hands were shaking. The doors opened into a penthouse office that was bigger than my entire restaurant. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. And there was Adrian sitting behind a massive desk. But he wasn't wearing a t-shirt. He was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my car. He stood up when I walked in. Elena. Sterling. I whispered, my voice trembling with betrayal. Are you with them? No. He came around the desk quickly, holding up his hands. God, no. No relation. Sterling is a common name, Elena. But I haven't been entirely honest about who I am. Who are you? I'm Adrian Sterling, CEO of Sterling Aviation and Sterling Global Resorts. I stared at him. The man who fixed my stove. The man who ate my chicken scraps. He was a billionaire. Why? I asked. Why the act? It wasn't an act, he said earnestly. I hate this life sometimes. The suits, the fake smiles, the people who only want me for my money. When I found your place, I found somewhere I could just be a guy. A guy who liked good food. He walked over to a table where a stack of documents lay. I bought the building, he said. I blinked. What? I bought your building, Elena. The one with the restaurant. I bought the whole block this morning. You what? And, he continued, picking up a folder. I want to go into business with you. Not as a savior. As a partner. Your food is incredible. You have a vision. I have capital. I want to franchise the Hearth. I want to put one in every one of my hotels across the globe. 50-50 partnership. You have full creative control. I handle the logistics. He handed me the folder. It was a partnership agreement. My name was next to his. CEO and founder. I can't accept this, I said, backing away. This is charity. I don't want charity. Read the contract, he said firmly. It's not charity. It's an investment. I expect a return. I know you're going to make me millions, Elena. I'm betting on you because you're a fighter. I saw you scrub those floors. I saw you haggle for vegetables. You have more grit in your pinky finger than my entire board of directors. He stepped closer. And, I don't want to lose you. If your place closes, you might leave. I don't want you to leave. The vulnerability in his voice broke me. I looked at the contract. I looked at him. 50-50ths? I asked. Down the middle, he said. I signed. The next 2 years were a whirlwind. We didn't just save the Hearth, we exploded it. We opened locations in London, Tokyo, Paris, and Dubai. I was traveling constantly. I was designing menus, training head chefs, and giving interviews. I went from being the girl scrubbing grease to being featured on the cover of Food and Wine. And Adrian was there every step of the way. He wasn't like Julian. He didn't want to dim my light. He wanted to hold a mirror up to it so it could shine brighter. He celebrated my wins. When I was stressed, he didn't tell me I was crazy. He flew me to a spa for the weekend. We fell in love. It wasn't the desperate, frantic love I had with Julian. It was a slow burn. A fire built on solid wood, not gasoline. We got married on a cliffside in Italy. No press. No drama. Just Uncle Leo giving me away, sobbing into a handkerchief, and Adrian looking at me like I was the only woman on earth. I was happy. Truly deeply happy. I had rebuilt myself. I was strong. But the past has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. It was our 2-year anniversary. I was flying to meet Adrian in Aspen. He was already there for a conference. I was taking the company jet, my jet. But I had to stop at the commercial terminal first to drop off some documents for our lawyer, who was flying out on a commercial flight. I sent my driver away and walked into the terminal. I was wearing a simple coat over my travel clothes. I wasn't wearing my jewelry, it was in my bag. I looked normal. Unassuming. I handed the documents to the lawyer near the security checkpoint and turned to leave. That's when I saw them. The Sterling clan. Julian, Victoria, Richard, Camilla. And Isabella. They were arguing with a ticket agent. Loudly. Do you know who we are? Victoria was screeching. We do not fly economy. This is a mistake. I'm sorry, ma'am. The agent looked tired. Your credit cards were declined for the upgrade. The only seats available are in row 45. I should have walked away. I should have just kept walking to the private terminal. But my feet rooted to the spot. Julian turned around in frustration, running a hand through his thinning hair. He looked older. Tired. His suit looked expensive but worn. Then his eyes locked on mine. He froze. He squinted as if he couldn't believe it was me. Elena. The whole family turned. The recognition hit them in waves. First confusion, then shock, and finally that familiar sneering superiority. They didn't see the CEO of a global restaurant group. They didn't see a woman who had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal in Hong Kong. They saw the girl they had thrown out like trash. They saw the charity case. They saw my plain coat, my flat shoes, the fact that I was standing near the economy check-in. And they made the biggest mistake of their lives. They assumed I had failed. They moved toward me like a pack of wolves sensing a wounded animal. The air in the terminal seemed to drop 10 degrees. Well, well, Camilla drawled, stepping forward first. She looked ragged, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the stress lines around her eyes. Look who crawled out of the gutter. Elena, Victoria said, clutching her designer bag, which I noticed was a season old. I see you're still struggling. Economy class. How fitting. Julian stepped up next to Isabella. Isabella looked exhausted. Being a mistress is fun. Being a wife to a man whose family is hemorrhaging money is hard work. She shifted her weight, resting her hand on her pregnant belly, looking at me with disdain. We heard you opened a taco stand or something. Julian laughed, though the sound was hollow. Did it go under? Is that why you're here? Looking for a handout. I didn't speak. I just watched them. It was fascinating, really. They were projecting so hard they could have been an IMAX theater. I had heard the rumors in the business world. The Sterling family fortune was built on shaky real estate deals. The market had turned. They were leveraging assets just to stay afloat. They were drowning, and they needed someone to step on to feel tall again. Cat got your tongue? Richard sneered. We're flying to Aspen. Business. Big business. Something you wouldn't understand. Actually, Isabella piped up, her voice sickly sweet. We're going to a resort. We need a break. It's so exhausting being at the top. But I guess you wouldn't know about that, would you, Elena? You just know about... What was it? Serving donuts. It was a bistro, I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I felt a strange sense of calm. And business is good. Sure it is, Julian mocked. That's why you're wearing a coat from Target and standing in the peasant line. People were starting to stare. The Sterlings were loud, obnoxious, and cruel. A few teenagers nearby had their phones out. I saw the red recording lights. You know, Victoria said, stepping into my personal space. She smelled of gin and desperation. We did you a favor. We cut the dead weight. Julian needed a real woman. A woman with class. And look at you. 5 years later and you're still nothing. You're a stain on our history, Elena. A mistake we corrected. You're right, I said. They blinked. They hadn't expected me to agree. You did do me a favor, I continued, my voice gaining strength, carrying over the hum of the terminal. You showed me exactly what kind of person you are. You showed me that class isn't about money. It's about character. And you are all bankrupt. How dare you? Victoria shrieked. You ungrateful little. I begged you, I said, looking at Julian. I was on my knees in our kitchen begging you to just love me. And you looked at me like I was garbage. You let your family tear me apart piece by piece. You took my home. You took my savings. You tried to take my sanity. Because you were crazy. Julian shouted, his face turning purple. You were pathetic. I was broken. I yelled back. By you. But here's the thing about broken glass, Julian. It cuts. Security. Richard bellowed, waving his arm. Get this woman away from us. She's harassing us. She's clearly deranged, Isabella added loud enough for the camera phones. Probably jealous of my baby. It's sad, really. Go away, Elena, Julian spat. Go back to your little life and leave the successful people alone. You'll never be one of us. You'll never be on our level. You are a loser. You always were, and you always will be. He turned his back on me, dismissing me. His family turned with him, snickering, preparing to march off to their row 45 seats while pretending they were kings of the world. That was the moment. That was the freeze frame. The absolute nadir of their cruelty. And then the intercom crackled. Mrs. Elena Sterling, the voice boomed. It wasn't just a gate announcement. It was the concierge service. Your aircraft is ready for departure. The flight crew has loaded your catering requests. Please proceed to Private Terminal 7 at your convenience. Your husband, Mr. Adrian Sterling, Has also sent a car to meet you on the tarmac upon arrival in Aspen. The name hung in the air. Sterling. Julian stopped walking. He spun around so fast he almost tripped over his own carry-on. What did they say? He whispered. Victoria looked like she had been slapped. Mrs. Sterling? I didn't move. I just let the moment land. That's a mistake, Camilla said, her voice shaking. You didn't keep our name. You couldn't. I didn't, I said softly. I took a new one. I reached into my Target coat pocket and pulled out my sunglasses. They were Cartier. I slid them on. Then I signaled to the porter standing a few feet away. A porter they hadn't noticed because they never look at service staff. He rushed forward, taking my small bag. Ready, Mrs. Sterling? He asked respectfully. Yes, thank you, James, I said. Wait. Julian stepped forward, his eyes wide, darting between me and the porter. Adrian Sterling? The billionaire? The aviation guy. My husband, I said simply. The color didn't just drain from their faces. It vanished. They looked like corpses. Isabella's jaw was unhinged. Richard looked like he was having a cardiac event. You married Adrian Sterling? Victoria gasped. But he's royalty. He's worth billions. And he treats me like a queen, I said. Something your son never learned how to do. Elena, Julian stammered, stepping closer, his tone completely changing. The aggression was gone, replaced by a slimy, desperate fawning. Elena, wait. This is... Wow. I knew you had it in you. I always said you were special, didn't I? Mom, didn't I say that? Back up, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The authority in my voice stopped him dead. We're family, Julian said, offering a weak, trembling smile. Technically. I mean, we have history. Aspen. We're going to Aspen too. Maybe we could share a ride? Catch up? For old time's sake. I looked at him. I looked at this man who had vowed to love me and then threw me away. I looked at the woman carrying his child, who looked ready to vomit with jealousy. I looked at his mother, who was already calculating how to spin this to her advantage. I don't offer rides to strangers, I said. Strangers. Julian looked hurt. I was your husband. My husband is a man of honor, I said. You're just a lesson I had to learn. I turned to the porter. Let's go, James. Wait. Victoria cried out. Elena, please. We're having financial problems. Difficulties. If you could just... I kept walking. I walked past the economy line. I walked past the first-class lounge. I walked toward the glass doors marked private aviation only. The security guard opened the door for me. I stepped through, but I paused just on the other side of the glass. I turned around. They were pressed against the glass partition like zoo animals. Julian had his hand on the glass. Victoria was crying. Real tears this time, tears of lost opportunity and greed. Camilla looked furious. Isabella looked defeated. Through the massive window behind me, my jet came into view. It was a Gulfstream G650, sleek white, with the Sterling logo in gold on the tail. The stairs were down. The pilot was standing at the bottom, saluting. I saw Julian look at the jet, then back at me. I saw the realization hit him. He could have had this. If he had just been kind. If he had just been loyal. He could have built this with me. But he chose to be small. And now he had to stay small. I didn't flip them off. I didn't scream. I just gave a small, polite wave. The kind of wave you give to someone you barely remember from high school. Then I turned around, walked across the tarmac, and boarded my jet. As the door closed and the cabin pressurized, the silence was beautiful. The flight attendant handed me a glass of champagne, vintage Dom Perignon. Rough morning, Mrs. Sterling? She asked kindly. I took a sip, looking out the window as the engines roared to life. I could see the terminal building shrinking away. No, I smiled. Actually, it was the best morning of my life. As the jet climbed to 40,000 feet, leaving the clouds and the Sterlings far below, I didn't feel the rush of triumph I expected. I just felt light. The heavy weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The need for their validation. The lingering voice of Victoria telling me I wasn't good enough had evaporated on that tarmac. I pulled out my phone. I had a text from Adrian. Landed safely. Can't wait to see you. I found that little Italian place you like. Dinner at 8. I typed back. Perfect. I have a hell of a story to tell you. I didn't know half of it yet. By the time we landed in Aspen, the video had gone viral. One of the teenagers recording in the terminal had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Rich family bullies woman in economy line, finds out she owns the airport LOL. Hashtag karma hashtag queen." It had 4 million views in 3 hours. When I got to the hotel, Adrian was waiting in the lobby. He hugged me, picking me up off the ground, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing in his scent, sandalwood and safety. "You're famous," he said, putting me down and showing me his phone. The video was everywhere. You couldn't hear everything we said, but the body language was clear. You saw the Sterlings crowding me, pointing fingers, sneering. You saw me standing tall. And you heard the announcement clear as day. Mrs. Elena Sterling. Then, the shot of me walking to the private gate while they stood there looking like fish gasping for air. The internet detectives did the rest. Within 24 hours, the Hearth was trending. People dug up the old court records of my divorce. They found out about the Sterling family's financial troubles. They connected the dots. The comments were brutal for them. Imagine fumbling a woman like that for a mistress. The mom looks like a villain from a Disney movie. That wave at the end? Coldest moment in history. But the real fallout happened offline. 3 days later, I was back in the office when I got a call from a familiar number. It was Uncle Leo. "Elena," he was laughing so hard he could barely speak. "You're not going to believe who just walked into the restaurant." "Who?" "Victoria Sterling. She came in wearing sunglasses, trying to hide. She ordered a coffee and asked if the owner was around. She wanted to apologize and see if we had any openings for, get this, a catering consultant." "You're joking." "I told her the only opening we had was the door," Leo chuckled. "And I told her to use it." I wish I could say that was the end of it, but desperation makes people do crazy things. Julian tried to email me. He sent a long rambling message to my work address. He talked about how he missed our connection, and how Isabella didn't understand him like I did. He even suggested that since his family had connections in real estate, maybe we could partner up to save his father's failing firm. I didn't block him. I did something better. I forwarded the email to Isabella. I heard later that she left him within the week. She took the baby, moved back in with her parents, and filed for child support that the Sterlings definitely couldn't afford. The Sterling empire crumbled slowly, then all at once. Richard's fraud was exposed by journalists digging into the viral airport family. They lost the estate. They lost the cars. I heard Victoria had to move into a condo that was smaller than the guest cottage she used to force me to live in. As for me, I didn't spend my time gloating. I had work to do. Adrian and I expanded the Hearth into a nonprofit arm. We started a program called the Second Course, specifically designed to help women who were starting over after abusive relationships or bad divorces. We gave them grants, business training, and legal support, the kind of support I wished I had when I was lying on that mattress on the floor. One evening, about a year after the airport incident, Adrian and I were sitting on the balcony of our home, watching the sunset over the city. I had just finished reading a letter from a woman named Sarah. She had used our grant to open a bakery after her husband left her with nothing. She sent me a picture of her grand opening, smiling, covered in flour, looking tired but free. "You know," Adrian said, swirling his wine, "you never talk about them anymore." "Who?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Julian. The family." I smiled. "I don't think about them." And it was the truth. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. I didn't hate Julian. I didn't hate Victoria. I just didn't care. They were characters in a chapter one had finished writing a long time ago. "I have everything I need right here," I said, reaching for his hand. We sat in silence for a while, the city lights twinkling below us like diamonds. "Do you think they learned anything?" Adrian asked. "No," I said. People like that never learn. They just blame the world for their bad luck. They'll spend the rest of their lives telling anyone who will listen that I stole their success, or that I got lucky, or that I tricked you. Let them talk. Adrian kissed my hand. Lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. Exactly. I looked at my reflection in the glass door. I looked different than the girl in the airport video. My shoulders were relaxed. My eyes were bright. I wasn't just wealthy in money. I was wealthy in peace. I remembered the girl who begged on her knees in the kitchen. I wanted to go back in time and hug her. I wanted to tell her, stand up. Wipe your face. It's going to hurt like hell, but you're going to build an empire out of these bricks they're throwing at you. That's the thing about rock bottom. It's a solid foundation. You can build anything on it, as long as you don't let the bitterness rot the concrete. So, if you are sitting there right now, feeling like your world has ended, if someone told you you're worthless, if you're looking at a bank account with 2 digits and wondering how you're going to survive, listen to me. They don't get to decide your value. You do. Take that pain. Take that anger. Take that sadness. And use it as fuel. Scrub the floors until your hands bleed if you have to. Learn the skills. Do the work in the dark so you can shine in the light. Because one day you're going to be standing in an airport or a boardroom or just in your own peaceful kitchen, and the people who hurt you are going to look at you and realize they lost the best thing they ever had. And you? You won't even need to say a word. You'll just put on your sunglasses, turn around, and board your jet. Your destination is better than where you came from. Thank you so much for watching my story. If this resonated with you, please like this video, it really helps the channel. And if you're currently building your own comeback, type, I am rising in the comments below. I want to read your stories. I want to cheer you on. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth, justice, and sweet, sweet success. Until next time, keep your head high. You never know who's watching.